today? What's going on in the world today? Well, loneliness may be, and I believe it is, it may be the number one emotional problem in our world today. Lonely people are everywhere. Lonely people are in theaters. Lonely people are in restaurants and diners. Lonely people, watch this, they're in churches. Lonely people are in cities. Lonely people, listen to this, are in big crowds. A recent survey of U.S. adults was given, and the YouGov poll found that 30% of millennials said they always or often feel lonely, compared to 20% of Generation X and just 15% of baby boomers. But the survey also identified that of all Americans, 40% of Americans deal with and say that they are lonely. And then it was interesting that this survey discovered that the loneliest age group ranges between 16 years and 24 years old. So that means that young people are the loneliest age group in America, according to the survey. Now, that doesn't mean that they're the only group, but according to the survey, that they're the loneliest, and for a lot of reasons. Maybe millennials are not participating in church or relationship with God as other generations, or not that involved in politics, or really engaged into the social media age, but yet and still that's what we have. And I believe that it's much larger than that. I believe that if you begin to look at it, that if you can remove the phoniness from Christian people, you'll find out that there is a great percentage of loneliness in the church. And so, while you may be holding on to your idea or your definition of what loneliness is, let's go ahead and talk about it. What is loneliness?
Actress Anne Hathaway confessed that loneliness is my least favorite thing about life. The thing that I'm most worried about is just being alone without anybody to care for or someone who will care for me. And Josh Whedon, who's the director of The Avengers, says that loneliness is about the scariest thing in the whole world. Disconnectedness is the only way to describe a world where most people live in impersonal cities or suburbs, where the internet replaces face-to-face conversation, where the average job lasts only 2 years, where people go from marriage to marriage and from state to state. And it's true that more people are living alone today. This really kind of surprised me. In 1950, less than 10% of the American households were just one person. But by 2010, 27% of the households in America had just one person. Several months ago, the Los Angeles Times reported on a new and growing fear and phobia that is part of our... You see, the problem that we have in our culture today is that technology promises the comfort of connection without the demands of intimacy. And it never keeps its promise. As we read our Bibles, we discover that this connection is the first thing in the Bible that God said, "This is not good." Isn't that interesting? In Genesis 2:18, the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper comparable to him." The first man who ever lived on planet Earth suffered the pain of being alone. And the Bible tells us the stories of many others along the way. I think of Noah, who preached for 120 years, and not one person was converted to the gospel. He and his family alone were saved through the flood. I think of Hagar, who got into domestic difficulty and ended up in the desert. And if you ever read that story, that's about the loneliest story you could ever read. She's all by herself. I think of Abraham trudging up the mountain with Isaac, knowing that God has called him to sacrifice his own son, and he doesn't understand it. Can you imagine the loneliness in his heart? And in what I believe is the loneliest verse of the Bible, Psalm 142 and verse 4, David says, "Look on my right hand and see, for there is no one who acknowledges me. Refuge has failed me. No one cares for my soul."
When that man came out of his lonely place, lonely place,